Hello everyone and welcome to another video with me, 320 Sim Pilot. I'm a real-world airline pilot, and in today's video I am very excited to be showing you the IniBuilds A350 as a first sort of preview. This is a huge release with Microsoft Flight Simulator. It's releasing for Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020 and 2024, and today I'll be flying it in 2024, but this is a remarkable machine. IniBuilds have kindly sent it over in a preview build, so this is not the final release version, but like I say, this is a work in progress. But today they very kindly letting me show it to you, and you can have a look and see what you think of this aircraft and whether it's something you might be interested in taking a look at in the future. The A350 is pretty much the most modern commercial airliner out there at the moment in terms of from Boeing and Airbus. It first flew in 2013, and this is the A350-1000, but included is the A350-900 and 1000. So the 900 was the original from 2013 that first flew, introduced in 2015 as an aircraft with Qatar Airways, and then the A350-1000 that we have here first flew or joined Qatar in 2018, and now it's becoming a more common sight in the skies. IniBuilds have worked a huge amount on this aircraft. They have been working really hard, and you're going to see that in today's video with so many different unique little features and tidbits that really make this quite a remarkable airliner experience in a flight simulator. But as I say, not a review, a preview copy, just to show you what you're in for with this A350. The A350 was originally based on the A330. Airbus were just going to sort of re-engine, re-wing and re-nose the 330, and then they eventually faced a bit of criticism amongst the industry and came up with the full redesign with the new fuselage as well, which became the A350 XWB, which stands for extra wide body. That's because it has a wider fuselage than the 330, allowing up to 10 seats across. It's still slightly narrower than a 777, but it is a wider than originally planned fuselage, so that allows it to have some quite nice spacious features put inside of it. It only has the Trent XWB engine from Rolls-Royce, so that's the only option you're going to get. But there are a few options that have already changed on the 350 over time, which IniBuilds have modelled, such as different winglets on the wingtips and so on. It has a composite fuselage, composite wings. It's really interesting design. So it's a very modern, very efficient aeroplane, and it's got some of the most fantastic avionics in the front that you've ever seen in an airliner to make it a real pleasure to operate, and we're going to see that in today's video. I currently fly the Boeing 787 long haul, which is in a way a competitor to the A350-900, although the 350 is a big aeroplane, especially the 1000, which is very much competing with the Boeing 777. It holds more passengers than the 787. So yeah, it's contemporary aircraft. These are the modern two from the big two manufacturers. So it's very interesting for me to see how the 350 has gone about things compared to the 787. So we'll talk about that a bit in today's video as well. We're going to take it for a short flight from London, and we're going to try and get through as many of those features as possible. Now this video is very much to show you the A350 and to give you a preview of it. It is not a full tutorial. I'll be doing more complex videos on the 350 a little bit later on, where we'll go through full flights and setups from cold and dark and so on. I will be going through cold and dark setups, so you will see everything, but this will not be a full sort of tutorial video in that sense. It's very much to show you as much as we can about this fantastic machine. In the menu you have the option, so you choose your aircraft, A350, and then you can have your A350, 1000 or 900, and you can see as well there's the no cabin option. Now for that you simply choose the variant you want, so for example the A350, 1000, go to configure, and then in here you can select, as you'd expect, your livery, but also to have no cabin. This would of course improve the performance if you're struggling. You can also turn off the cabin in the actual aeroplane itself in the EFB, but there we go. So you can choose either of those and then choose a livery regardless of whether you have a cabin or not. So here is our lovely A350 parked up on the stand. This is a big machine, make no doubt about it. I know this is the 350-1000, but even the 900 is a very tall aeroplane. It's noticeable when you see it taxiing around airports. It's also a very pretty machine. People like it. It's common for pilots to remark on the 350 how nice they think it looks. I don't quite know why, but something about it seems to really appeal. Maybe the fancy goggles around the window, or those fancy winglets out there on the wingtips. They all look very nice. It's got very tall nose gear that's also very far forward, and we'll see the effects of that later on in the video as we take it into the air and as we fly around. And you can see up here on the nose we have all these air data probes. You've got angle of attack. I think they're pitot and angle of attack sensors combined. You've got lots of those. You've got AOAs, you've got temperature sensors. Also very far forward, you'll see that they're right at the very front of the airplane. This is a really good idea. It's not uncommon for these sensors to be a bit further back, sometimes behind the flight deck, and the result of that is that if you want to use this front door up here, you can end up with the jet bridge getting a bit too close, or the stairs, and they're very sensitive, very expensive bits of equipment that you can't dent one of those because it will ground the airplane for a long time. It takes a lot of recalibrating and so on. They've got to be absolutely spot on. The airflow into those is completely critical. But it's part of the modern way of designing airplanes to have all these different sensors, and they've got very clever air data systems to help deal with things like blocked pitos and so on, to stop that being such a devastating issue as it has been in the past. There's a static port up there, you can see, with the red square around it, and then you've got some more of those back here in a more traditional place on the side of the fuselage. They're put here so they're not affected by the dynamic pressure on the front of the airplane, so you get actual representations of the static air pressure, which is how you can tell your altitude. Moving down, this is the 350-1000, so we've got our triple bogey main landing gear. This is different from the 900 and quite unusual for one aircraft type to have different numbers of wheels. They did this for runway bearing strength, and it makes a lot of sense. What that means is you can't have too much weight put through too few number of wheels. The airplanes can do it, the tyres and the manufacturers can make it happen. The problem is the airports aren't set up for it. The tarmac is not really designed for it. Think back to the 747-400, you know, and all the 747s, and think of the 380. Look how many wheels they've got. Whereas you've now got these airplanes that are almost carrying as many passengers as these older aircraft, like the 74, but they're running around with the much less wheels. And the problem with that is all that weight goes through a much smaller surface area into the tarmac, and then these tarmac and concrete aprons all have to deal with that, and the runways as well. So you can actually find that your airplane can't land somewhere because it's too high of a code for the runway. The 787-10 that I fly, it does have that issue because it's a big airplane with only 4 main gears, and as a result there's certain airports that don't like it because it's bad for their runways. So there you go. Wandering around the airplane, you'll see as well that the fuselage is largely it's got a lot of composite in it, but there is aluminium towards the front of the airplane, and we'll see, and if you look at the nose here, you can actually just see that those rivets and so on, and as the airplane wears, that will actually start to show streaks and dirt, and then the paint comes off the rivet heads, and we'll show you that later on. You can adjust that manually yourself, or as time goes on, as you use a livery, it will start to show through. So the front of the airplane a bit more traditional, and then further back a bit more composite. Remember, this airplane was originally going to be just an A330 with some fancy wings, fancy nose, and they weren't going to bother with the fuselage, but then they did, and that's what got us the extra wide body name. It's a bit wider than it was going to be, and then the 330, which allows it to have up to 10 across in economy. Now, it's worth noting that the 777 fuselage is still wider than this one. It's not actually the widest fuselage out there, despite the name, but it's certainly wider than it was going to be, so part of it being a big, chunky airplane. All the panel lines and rivets along here, absolutely fantastic. It looks really nice, and you can see all the decals and so on are spot on. I'd love to show you inside, but my Flight Simulator 2024 is not behaving properly at the moment, so we'll show you a different clip of that shortly. But yeah, absolutely awesome. Look at the detail around the landing gear as well. That's great. And I believe these brake wear pins, which you can just see just there in the middle, those thin pins, they will actually wear down over time. Remarkable. I don't know how they designed the main landing gear bay to hold such big landing gear compared to the 900. That seems like such a massive thing to do, to re-engineer the landing gear to hold extra wheels. It's quite an amazing thing. Engines are the Trent extra wide body. That's the only engine you're going to get on an A350 Rolls-Royce, and it's very, very typical of a modern engine. This looks very similar to the Neo engines on the 320 Neo. It also looks incredibly similar to the Rolls-Royce engines on the 787s, as of course the GE as well. They all have just ended up in a very similar place. Big curvy fan blades, and then you've got that thrust sensor up at the top, or pressure sensor. That's a Rolls-Royce specific feature, but there we go. Big engine. Interesting, it doesn't have the chevron cowling that was becoming a bit of a thing. It seems to not have bothered. Walking along the wing, what I'd really like is that there is dirt and grime. Again, that builds up over time on the airframe, but the whole thing looks like the real deal. This is what an airplane looks like that's in service. Even if it's just a few months old, they start to look like this pretty quickly. Remember, a long-haul aircraft like this will spend nearly all its time up in the air, It does not sit on the ground. In a day, you know, it will do a 12-hour flight, then spend 2 hours on the ground, then do a 12-hour flight, then spend 2 hours on the ground. They live in the air. They live above us, 6 miles up, you know, so they are hard working. Some other nice details around the back of the landing gear. You can see splatters from the grease. There's lots of grease used on all these moving parts to make sure the gear works properly. And as you can see up there, it's those black splodges. That's where it sort of flies off when you're in 200-mile-an-hour winds as the gear comes down, and it splatters along the back of the flaps usually, and sometimes on the tail even if it gets far enough. I think this is the ram air turbine door, so I wouldn't hang around underneath this yet. Ram air turbine, keep clear, because if someone accidentally presses the button on the flight deck or something goes wrong with it and it falls out, that would be a big thing to hit you on the head. You do not want that. I love this sort of flat panel behind the flaps here as well that sort of runs on the wing box. Very unique to the 350. It's cool. I don't know why they've done it like that and why they haven't done it like that before, but it's quite an interesting design. I assume it helps reduce turbulence where the wing joins the aeroplane fuselage. Up on the top of the tail there, you can actually see the camera, that little bump sticking out, the taxi camera fitted to some aircraft, but not functioning at the moment in Flight Simulator 2024. And then around the back and so on, we have the APU, and you can open up the cowls and some of the doors, which I'll show you a clip of as well. The aeroplane also has a lot of options, more options than I realized were available. So you can have things like the different winglets. So there's the old style, slightly shorter ones, then they've made new winglets out there that stick up a bit even more, look even more swoopy and fancy. You can also have brake fans or no brake fans. So these are the brake fans, look very similar to the 320 brake fans, but you can have the wheel hubs without brake fans. So there's a few different options like this, but the livery can be set just to do that for you. So the livery maker can select it to be right for the real aircraft counterpart. Awesome. Oh yeah, you've got LED lights as well. If I go to the nose gear, which is all the way up here, it's a long way away, we can have a look at that. There's two different options for that nose gear taxi light as well. So this is the fancy LED version. I think it's time we get into the airplane and power it up. Here's how you can open up the panels, by the way, doing the walk around. You can just literally click on them. How great is that? Even with a little sound effect. So what's this one? This looks like, let's see if I can work it out. I don't touch any of these panels. Ground power? Flight? I don't even know. This one is a mystery to me. Could it be another external power socket? What does it say? Does it have a label on it? No. See, these are all coded according to... maybe this is for the landing gear doors by the looks of it, actually. These are all coded panels that the engineers will know where they're looking for. But there's loads of them that open up. If we move around, this will be I think this is the pack outlets. Yep. So the airplane's depowered, so that's not showing anything at the moment. And somewhere around here, this is the pack inlet. Very traditional, by the way. The air conditioning system on this is a bleed air system, bleed air from the engine, just like a 320, which is why it looks very similar. If I go to, let's go to the other side, and I think we'll find the fuel panel and the hydraulics. Here we go. Look at this. Hydraulic refill, I think this is. 5,000 psi hydraulic system on the A350. This is the more modern way. The 787 uses a 5,000 psi system as well. They previously aircraft used 3,000 psi like the A320. The reason you want a higher pressure system is you can have smaller pipes and it saves weight of smaller parts. And the only downside being that it's obviously quite fancy and expensive to manufacture parts that can contain 5,000 psi. But that's what they've got. It's quite something. And like I say, 787 does the same thing, so it allows you to have smaller actuators and pipes and so on, because you're running high pressure. But yeah, so panels open as you walk around. Pretty cool. Oh, and let's the engine as well. Look at this. You can just click on it. Up it goes. How cool is that? You can see the FADEC control computer on the side there. Fuel metering unit. I think that would be higher up. Yeah, these engines always blow my mind that they can just run all day like this. Yeah, they are amazing bits of engineering. And this is the oil, and I believe this reservoir number will go down as well as you use up the oil on the airplane. Pretty cool, isn't it? Now we are on the flight deck, of course, and we are going to get the airplane powered up. Now, as I said, this won't be a full video guide tutorial. I'm going to go through the full procedure with you as best as I know it, or certainly just to get it powered up. But yeah, more detailed videos to come in the future. So first of all, let us have a quick look around and see that this is a very, very recognizable Airbus flight deck. What we want to do is come to the overhead panel, and you can actually check the battery voltages. So the battery buttons are here, but if you go all the way up here, you can actually select this to see the voltage in the batteries, something you would do on the 320 as well. So we have enough voltage there, as you would expect for a flight simulator. What we're going to do then is the standard. So gears down, Parking brakes on. Mode selector is norm and the master switches are off. Wiper selectors are off, and we've done a battery voltage check. So let's turn on the batteries, and I'm going to turn the sound. You should hear all the computers come to life. It makes some amazing clunking noises. So that's the batteries on, and then we give it external power. There's all our warnings and flight warning computers coming online, things like that. Very familiar, even to a 320 pilot. It's cool. It's really cool. What all those clicking noises are is the servos and so on underneath the airplane. There's a lot of relays and so on going on in the avionics bay underneath. So that apparently, according to the IniBuilds stream, is modelled very accurately, and I believe them. So yeah, fantastic noise. You can see here we've got Prim and Sec. These are the flight control computers. They're renamed versus what we used to in the 320, ELACs and so on. That's relatively old school now. And then you've got Prims and Secs over here as well. But they are all obviously set to auto and just coming to life. Screens coming to life as well. You'll see, and we'll talk a lot about these screens in just a moment. One other option you can have though is this bezel. We've got the blue bezel around. This is the slightly older version of the screens. They've got rid of that now in the new ones, which looks really fancy indeed. But this is again set by the livery, and we'll see how to do that shortly. So that's the airplane powering up now, giving it a second to come to life. What we're just going to do is just continue a few other things. I'm going to make sure we have enough oxygen, which we do. And I'm going to make sure, well, we've seen the oil already on the walk around. I'm not entirely sure if you need to check that yourself, but you can press engine. It doesn't actually show up. So I think you need to perhaps do the old FADEC power on like you did in the 320 Neo, which you can do FADEC ground power up here. I don't know if this is a procedure or not. There's every chance that you don't have to check the oils because it's an ETOPS airplane, and the engineers would do that separately, or you do it when you power up. Come on, always difficult. There we go, on. That gives us a ground power, and then we can see the oil quantity, 18.6 and 18.6, which is out to 15 degrees. Just to show you that the depth is here, you know, all these buttons work. It's amazing. But there we go. So oil's good, and the last thing I'm going to have a look at is hydraulics. So you go down here, and we can look at the hydraulic quantity. And just make sure, yep, we're in the green bands. That one's getting a little bit low on the right. Certainly getting there. Looks like it's just about in the green. So yeah. Good. In the 787, you just have to look and see if it tells you to refill it or not, and it would have a big RF saying refill, or overfill as well. It can say OF, but yeah, that's the only thing you're looking for there. Good. So that is sort of the initial scan done. Now, I'm a big fan of the inbuilt checklists available. The checklists so far here are they're the abbreviated before takeoff checklists and so on. These are actually basically the ones that you're going to get from the electronic checklist system. So we're not going to use this. We're going to use the built-in one in the aeroplane, which works really nicely. We'll see that as we go through. Let's continue with our flow now. So on the overhead panel, I'm going to turn on the crew supply for the oxygen, turn on the ground recorder control, and we'll set the RSs to nav. 1, 2, 3. And then we're going to leave these lights out. This is sort of the maintenance thing. We're not going to fiddle with that anymore. Coming down here, I'm going to have the strobe lights in auto, logo lights in auto as well, and then we'll have the main lights all off, nav lights on, and the beacon off. I'm going to arm the emergency exit lights. I'm going to put the no mobile signs to auto, and I'm going to put the no smoking on, and I'll leave the seatbelts off for now. Leave all these other lights off. We've got the anti-ice, and it surprised me to see that this actually is an on or off switch. I assumed it would be an automatic switch, so I don't know if the A350 has automatic anti-icing. 787 and the long-haul Boeings do, where it will just sense that it thinks it's in icing and it will turn them on. But it looks like the same as the 320, you'd have to do it yourself. So I'm not sure on that. Same for the wing, on or off, no auto position. So that's something I'll be interested to find out about. Probe and window heat button, we do have an auto position, and that's what we're going to leave it in. We're leaving cabin pressurization should all be in the normal / lights out auto position, very important. And our air conditioning, we're going to leave all off and in the middle, and then the cabin temperature, the purser can do that. Apparently that's quite normal on the 350 as well. Again, a lot of my 350 information has come from IniBuilds excellent stream with their A350 captain, Pablo. And then we've got the external power. We've set 1 and 2 to auto, 2 external powers on the 350 compared to just 1 on the 320. Obviously it's a big airplane with a lot of electronics. So we have our 4 batteries. The reason we have 4 is it's going to need a lot of redundancy in an airplane like this. So it's got battery 1, battery emergency 1, battery emergency 2, and battery 2. You've also got an APU generator down here. You can isolate the sides. I don't know what the ELM is. And then you can obviously channel power to the passenger systems and the galley. There's a lot of electrical systems in the cabin, so these are big, powerful switches, but you need them if you want to isolate electronics. Let's say you've got fire or something like that starting up. Moving on to fuel, I'm going to turn on all the fuel pumps. Very simple fuel system on the 350, very much like the 787. It's where systems have gone. They got really complicated for a while, and now they've gone really simple in terms of what they tell us anyway. So we have the main tanks and the center tank and the main tank, and that's it. And then you can cross feed between them and around them. You can actually do a bit more cross feeding on the 350 than you can the 78. Hydraulics, just 2 systems, green and yellow, as we saw earlier. They've again shrunk down the amount of complexity, but they've got a huge amount of redundancy because you have engine-driven pumps, electric-driven pumps, and then they have actual backup actuators. And we'll talk about that a little bit later on. We can do the fire tests, engine 1, engine 2, and APU fire tests. That's all good. So let's get the APU up and running. I can press the master switch, and then straight away, just like a 320, it brings up this screen. No amber crosses because it is always powered on. It is there, ready to go. The reason you want that on a modern airplane is it's actually quite handy to have an APU that's ready to go and can spring to life on its own, because if it senses a major power loss or electrical loss, then it can actually, in certain circumstances, start itself. 787 does a very similar thing as well. It's very handy on these twin-engine ETOPS airplanes. I'm a little surprised to see there's only one generator on the APU, but I think that's because this isn't quite as an electrical of an airplane as the 787. Moving down here, we have the manual engine start. We'll leave that alone. Cabin system smoke, I don't actually know what that's referring to, but that sounds pretty horrible. Don't want to know about that. And cargo smoke as well, so these are all the fire systems. More flight control computers and more other systems. So that's our sort of EFB, and here's our ROPS and takeoff surveillance. So this is the system that would shout at you about the runway condition, runway too short, that sort of thing. But we'll see more of that later on. That's the overhead panel. By the way, check out the flight deck. Pretty cool, right? We'll have a quick look around in just a moment. Next, we would set up our flight control unit once we know what we're doing, so I'll leave that alone for now. Moving down, gears down, anti-skid nose wheel steering should be on. I love that that's exactly the same switches on the 320. Look at that. Brake fans are off, and air data and FMS are in norm. We're going to set up the FMS shortly. It's really great. And down here we have our radio management panel. This is, again, much easier to use than the 320 system. Much better, very similar again to the 7.8. The speed brake's retracted, parking brake handle is on, rudder trim, and flaps are up, and that matches. Flaps, by the way, are hidden over here now on the PFD. Really good place to put it. I really like that. And then this is our ECAM control and takeoff config button. Here's our TCAS control, although we'll see that actually there's a different way to control it, a bit easier. And that's it. Great. So yeah, so far, so Airbus. So things we need to do now is set up the airplane through the EFB and then load up the FMS. So we'll do those two shortly. Let's take a quick look around the airplane first though, inside. So let's have a look around the 350 flight deck then. I have been on the 350 flight deck, and as far as I can remember, this looks very accurate, although I wasn't on it for very long, so I'm sure they've got much better resources than I do. But it's a really cool looking thing. It's got big windows. It's a very big flight deck. People who have flown on lots of airplanes will often, and have also seen the 350 flight deck, really like it for its size. It's the most common thing I hear said about it. So have you seen the 350 flight deck? It's really big, and it is. I mean, look at it. It's cool. I love the design of the seats as well. These stars, I really like that. Otherwise, quite traditional. Look at that. There's a classic Airbus armrest, classic Airbus side stick. Not much has changed there, which I think is a good thing. It's a great system. But yeah, big, spacious, big windows, and it's meant to be very nice, very comfortable. And you're quite a long way in front of the engines, especially on this 1000 variant, so I imagine it's quite quiet. I don't think you can see the wings from it. No, I bet you can't. But yeah, very nice, modelled very nicely by IniBuilds. And look at this, you've got all these different hatches, including down there, you can actually hear the humming going on in the avionics bay. Really cool. Oxygen masks that you can test, they all work. Really great. And even the jump seats fold down. It's just fantastic. Look at it all. Absolutely ridiculous. So this is your lovely... This jump seat here looks a little bit sparse. I'd rather sit on this one, I think. Proper seat there for the third pilot. And the reason you get a proper seat here on these long-haul airplanes is because there's a pilot sitting there a lot more than there is on a short-haul one. I'm not actually sure what this screen is for. Probably some sort of engineering function. You can obviously leave and go through the cabin. And look at this. This is great. Even the toilet's modelled. It all works. Even the flush. That's ridiculous. We haven't seen that very often in add-ons, but it does work there. So yeah, we'll close that up. Oh, if I can find the thing. There we go. And this, I've barged in. This is the crew rest area. So up there, got the rest seat for the pilots and somewhere to snooze. Here's a full galley, and you can pull the curtains back. And you have your model cabin. This is a British Airways airplane, so it certainly looks like a British Airways business class cabin, or very similar to it. A version of. Really cool. Really cool. And this carries on all the way down. All these curtains work, which is ridiculous, really. And you can go and see all the other cabins, should you so choose. Looking out the window, even here, we're still a long way forward of that engine. Such a big aeroplane. Right, so yeah, it's very good. And this, of course, can be customized based on the livery. So we're going to see a lot of nice cabins, I think. Around the flight deck, there's lots of details that work. You've got a tray table that comes out, has a keyboard as well, but this doesn't work on the FMS. This is for use of this screen over here, which makes sense to me because you don't want to accidentally spill coffee on this and then have it start typing things into the FMS when you're in the middle of the Pacific Ocean and start, you know, recalculating things or deleting the route. Very important you don't delete the route when you're in uncontrolled or non-radar airspace like oceanic airspace. So yeah, but this does work for this. That's my understanding anyway. So we'll close that down. You've got the footrests down here. We'll put those away. We don't have a coffee cup, which is a bit annoying because the first officer did go and get themselves one, so that's a bit rude. And you also see the wipe here for wiping down the headset, a common sight on flight decks. These sort of alcoholic cleansing wipes, you know, for keeping things clean. Lots of other things work. Sun visors, look at this. This is great. Something the 787 doesn't have, sadly, is proper sunshades, so they're absolutely lovely. Really nice. So we might use those up in the cruise. Right, so I want to get the airplane now configured for our flight, and this is very straightforward. This is done through this EFB. Now this is a common thing now. The 787 uses a very similar device where the manufacturers are integrating the electronic flight bag into the aircraft, and there's some big advantages to this. Firstly, it regulates it very well. It means that the aircraft will have the same sort of interface. It also means that when you're doing things like performance data, that data can be integrated straight into the aircraft's avionics because it can be more thoroughly checked and certified, and it removes the chance of you entering it wrong. Because of course previously most aircrafts have an iPad or a tablet of some variety stuck onto this window, and then that of course means that you calculate your numbers on there and then you have to type them into the box. Now that sounds fine, but why not type the numbers into here and then send them straight over? 787 does that, and the 350 I believe now does it as well. It certainly does in this simulator anyway. I'm not sure if the 350 in the real world actually has the system integrated like that, but certainly I imagine it's an option for one day down the line. I think it's a great idea. I think removing the amount of times you have to type in performance numbers is crucial to helping with the safety of that. And you've got to remember, it is crucial. If you type in the zero fuel weight instead of the gross weight, that would mean that you could be up to 100 tons lighter, heavier than the weight you put in. And we've seen instances around the world where this has been an issue. So anyway, I'm a big fan of having integrated systems, but for now, we are going to see how to use this sort of IniBuilds version of an EFB. So first of all, this is the menu it starts you off on. And through here, you can set up your options for the simulator. So you can load in the panel states, or if we go to options, you can do things like adjust the simulation. So having pause at top of descent, automatically disconnecting the GPU. Well, we've done that ourselves anyway. Auto step climb. So if you want to set up for a long haul flight where the airplane needs to climb as it burns off fuel, it gets lighter. It wants to cruise higher and higher. So you have that feature enabled because otherwise you'd overburn on the fuel. So you could leave that running. Performance mode as well is on, so it hides some parts of the model. I don't know how it's doing that actually, because we did have a cabin. So yeah, anyway, third party, you can load in your SimBrief user ID and also use Navigraph nav data, and we'll see how that affects things shortly. But essentially it does allow you to have maps on your screen here. It's really cool. You can adjust your volume control, sound cabin options, and there's some good ones here. Gear bump noise, cabin chimes in the cockpit, and so on. Audible thrust detent I have on, so I can hear, because I'm using an Xbox controller, so I can hear when I'm hitting the clicks, which is pretty cool. Throttle calibration, obviously, and then these, lots of different things, like the wing hooks, fuel jettison system, SATCOM, battery type. This is all done by the livery. So lots of different options, like I was saying, different lights, brake fans or not. OAS settings, this is this little screen over here. This is the EFB, so you can have auto brightness. You can choose your charts. So we've got Lido charts, which is really cool. And then we've got auto day-night, aircraft weights, kilograms, obviously, and the boot time I've set it to fast to be a bit quicker than realistic. And finally, aircraft options, thrust reduction at 1,000 feet standard. IRS line, I just go to instant for these videos and streams, but you can obviously have it realistic, synchronized, and also tiller disconnects, yes, and rudder control tiller, yes, which is how I can taxi using an Xbox controller. And there we go, and display type here would remove these bezels if you had it. So quite a few options in there. So go back to our flight ops menu. You've also got situations, which you'll see later, and in maintenance, we talked about how our hydraulics is actually getting a bit low, and you can see that it's down there, so you can service the hydraulics. And now, let's get back to our hydraulics tab, and I think we'll be in a better place. Yeah, there you go, a bit more convincingly in the green band, although slightly lower now on the green system, but there we go. And you can service the engines as well, the amount of oil, AP oil, and so on. This is cool. Look at this. Replace the brakes, so those brake wear pins will go down. Sort out the batteries if they are starting to get too drained. And then here's where you can open those doors. Can't open the APU right now because we're running it. Really cool. And finally, the ground tab. You can open up more doors. You can see we have external power plugged in, which we could get rid of if we wanted to already, but that will go shortly anyway. So yeah, nice. Next, what I'm going to do is actually run through the sim from the start. So we'll go through to load sheet. We've done grounds, so we'll go to load sheet, and I've already loaded my flight into SimBrief. So I've got a flight loaded from here in Rome up towards London. We're imagining this is sort of a proving flight for this new A350. So let's do SimBrief imports, and it should, very straightforward, bring through a 0 fuel weight and a fuel load, and I'm hoping bring through some passengers as well. Okay, it's got the right 0 fuel weight. It does bring through the passengers sometimes. I've seen it work, but it's not this time around. And the fuel load, 18.6 tons of fuel, is correct to what we wanted as well. So what I'm going to do is say set the 0 fuel weight. And set the fuel. There we go. Now it's brought in the numbers. Excellent. Loading fuel complete. Good. Okay, so that is now done. We have 261 passengers with a 0 fuel at 185.3 tons, with 18.6 tons of fuel, 18.6 tons of fuel. Great stuff. Not much. You can see how much fuel. We haven't even filled the wing tanks. The center tank is huge, and that's where a lot of the fuel will be. So yeah, amazing. I mean, this airplane can carry a lot of fuel. I think it can carry around 130 tons of fuel, something like that. 787 takes about 100 tons of fuel, so yeah, these are big numbers. This will get this airplane, it can go a long way, and I'm not even sure. I think Qantas are having their Project Sunrise ones with even more. There's ultra long range versions coming out there, so there we go. Anyway, that's now done. If we go to OFP, it should load in our flight, Rome to Heathrow, A350-1000. And next is the takeoff performance calculator. So what we're going to do is, before we run the performance, let's start loading up the FMS. Now we've got the airplane and some weights. The FMS is a great system. Don't feel intimidated. It looks different, but it is better to use than the A321, and I do believe that. First of all, here we are on the main screen. Notice my cursor. This is a great system in the simulator, where as I move the mouse around, that just moves the cursor. You can see that there's two different cursors. This is the FO's cursor, this is the captain's cursor. It doesn't swap between them. You have the right cursor for the right screen. It's locked to that screen because that's correct. Now in the real airplane, it's controlled by this trackball here. So you have this trackball and wheel down here, and then clicks around the side that you would use. But it's actually much easier that we can just drag our mouse around and click on what we want to do. So I'm going to show you how to get through this. First of all, make sure you're in FMS 1. If you click on this top tab, you can do the ATC comm. That's for communicating with air traffic control. We're not going to worry about that today. Surveillance, that's for your weather radar and your transponder pages. And then you've got the checklists, which we'll see later on, and FCU backup. FCU backup is used if there's a problem with the flight control unit up here. Because if this breaks and you're 4 hours from an airport over the Pacific Ocean, you need a way to fly the airplane without having to sit there hand flying it the whole time, because the two pilots are going to be very busy fixing things and sorting out diversions and so on. So you want some sort of control over the airplane still, and especially for things like setting the QNH you're going to need, aren't you? So this is important as a backup, because you can see here it's got like the LS button, so we can fly our ILS and so on. And then here is some other options, such as different modes for the autopilot, such as pulling and pushing the altitude knob and so on. You can do it all through here. So this is a great backup to have. Again, it's a good idea on a long haul aeroplane like this. This feature is also on the 787, funnily enough, a very similar system. So make sure you're in FMS1 in the top left. It was originally on this page, the status page, data status, and as you can see, it's the correct aeroplane, it's got the out of perfect, just don't worry about that, and the data good database, and you can swap over to your other database if you want to. Really great. But what you want to do is go to active, sorry, no you don't, you want to go to active and then init, and that will take you to this page. In here, you can type in all the information you want. So you can type in your flight number, where you're going from, and where you're going to. You can have a name for the company route, choose your flight level, cost in X trip wind, exactly the same as the A320 in its A page. Now, if you want to type it in, you have to click on the box first, and then you come down to this tab, and you can type it in. So if we're going to be the BAW222, and then you hit enter, and it enters. And you'll notice the cursor has already moved across to the next option, to aircraft status, which will bring you up to the aircraft status page. Now as you go through this, let's now select the from, and we are in LIRF, and then I press enter. Notice the cursor has automatically jumped to the next box, and that's already highlighted. So now I could just type in EGLL. So that's a great automatic system, and then we'll put in the alternate EGSS, where this is fitted to the real airplane, and IniBuilds a model it here where it jumps to the next box that you're likely to use. Again, 787 does actually do the same thing. It's quite handy. It's better than having to use a trackball to sort of work your way through it. It's really cool, and it's cool that they've modeled it like this. So that way you can just keep typing and pressing enter. Now there is another way to do it, which is you can actually, if you click and then press Control on your keyboard, you can then just type in. So I could put in cost index 45. You've got to select it first, and then press Control 45, and then type it in. And you can see down the bottom, keyboard input active, because I pressed Control. And that is a way to allow you to type in using the keyboard, which you could do for all of these options up here. And then you have to hit enter to confirm it. But like I say, easier actually to let the cursor jump around and type it in down here, I think. Anyway, so 2 ways to input there. What I actually want to do is I want to request the company flight plan because I have got one saved and ready to go. So how do I do that? Let's see if I can clear this over. So just like on the A320, I changed the database around in the aircraft status tab. It cleared this out, and much easier is load it into SimBrief, and then you can do the request. But I thought it was important to show you how to type into this page. So pending request, received company flight plan, insert. Look at that, done. Flight number, routes, cost and X, flight level, all loaded in for us. It's fantastic. Even the wind, look at that trip wind it's got loaded in, but you could of course do a company wind request, super easy. And that's our init A page. And this is great because this takes us through it step by step, just like the Boeing does. So now, I can clear that info by the way, these little messages appear, so that's saying the route's been uplinked, so get rid of that. IRS is done. They're aligned, they're in nav mode, they're not aligning still, so that's done. Then the next step is departure. Let's go to departure. Let's depart from Rome, runway 25. And let's go with a SOSIV 6 Romeo, and then a transition of the SOVAN 7 Alpha. I'll show you on these charts. You'll see that takes us off, then make a right, left, RF711, and then up to SOSIV. Now that's slightly different to our flight plan, but I want to show you how this works. So temporary flight plan now shows us in amber. And if we look up here, we can do exactly as before, go to plan, just like any 320, and you can see the amber lines, all looking good. And up it goes. So that's the departure, insert, and in it goes. And look at that, there's the route. If we keep zooming out, you'll see that it won't actually connect now with the rest of my flight plan. So we were meant to go via Nembo, but now we're going via SOVAN. So let me show you how this works. This is where this FMS comes into its own. I need to connect these waypoints now. If I scroll down with this here, you can see there's a discontinuity, SOVAN Nembo. Now we don't want to go to Nembo, we want to go SOVAN GovGo. So how do I do that? Well, let's click on Nembo, left click, and then simply delete. How great is that? We'll have to confirm that. And there you go, that's now gone. But also I want to go from SOVAN to GovGo. So while I'm still editing this, I can click on the discontinuity, delete, and now it's drawn the line together. And then we can do insert. It's so straightforward. It's a great way to navigate through an FMS. I absolutely love it. And if we go back to page 1, you can see the departure in more detail. We can see the altitude constraints as well. So if we zoom in, you'll see it on here. And actually I'm going to press constraints up here. This is just like the buttons on the 320. Look at this. You can have your airports. We'll have traffic and terrain. Why not? Maybe we'll have let's have a VOR1 showing. Anyway, there we go. So there's our constraints. And if we compare it to our departure charts, we can check through it carefully. Oops. So, takeoff, RF777 max 200 knots. There's 200 knots there, 792, sorry. And then we go up to 706, 200 knots, 3,000 feet, max 200 knots above 3,000 feet. And you can click on the constraint and it will show you at or above 3,000. Likewise for the speeds, 200 knot speed. And you can delete it in here if you want to. But I'm not going to fiddle with that because it's correct. Then we got 6,000 at RF711, above 6,000. Again, if I click on it, at or above. It's great. This whole FMS is so intuitive. Anyway, so our departure is checked, and that makes sense. That back here on the bottom left, we can see init. So let's go back to the init page. So we've done RS, we've done departure. Nav aids, well, we're just going to be automatically tuned, so we'll leave those alone. And time for fuel and loading. And you'll see that this is just taking us through all the tabs we need to do. So let's load up the performance of the aeroplane. To do this, we'll go back to our EFB over here, and we'll go back to our load sheets, and I'll take my 0 fuel weight 185.3, and I'm going to type that into here. So click on it, and then I'm just going to do it down here, 185.3, enter. Cursor did go over to 0 fuel weight CG, but my mouse got in the way there. Our 0 fuel weight CG is down here, 29.6. So let's type that in. Click, 29.6. Enter. Block fuel is 18.5 now, 18.5, enter. And passenger number, we have 261 passengers. It's a shame, yeah, if you look over that does mess up the cursor, 261. So perhaps it is easier to use the control button. 261 passengers, there's our trip fuel, alternate fuel, final reserve fuel. It's pretty tight on fuel. That's to do with the way the flight planning's been done. But yeah, there we go. That's loaded in. Good. Just going to hit return. And finally, takeoff perf. We've done everything else. So takeoff perf time. I'm going to go to takeoff perf over here. This is great. You can either choose your runway, type in the airport and choose the runway, or sync what we loaded into the FMS. So there it is, LARF, runway 25. Chosen automatically for us. You can then sync the weather. Variable at 317, QNH 1031. And that just loads it in. Now we're very light. This is very light for a 350. A long haul aeroplane like this, like I say, should be another 80 tons heavier, I'd have thought normally. So taking up at 203 tons is very light. But we can expect that to mean we can take off config 1+F with the air conditioning on and a big flex. But it would tell us if we can't. Now this weather isn't quite right. The weather's actually slightly different to this. So I'm going to type in 1013 as the QNH, which is what I know it is. Oh no, let's do it properly. 1013. Temperature is 15. Variable 3 is good. Dry runway, anti-ice off, and there's the weight. And then we're just going to hit compute. And there it is. And I love this, send to FMS. Now again, I'm slightly confused as to whether this is something the real aircraft has or not, or whether they would calculate it some other way. But what's great is that comes across, and do check it anyway. It's worth checking. So runway 25, 135, 139, 146. Those are the speeds. 135 V1, 139 VR, 146 V2. Confirm. Flaps 1, trim of 29.9, packs on, anti-ice off, 1,000 feet for the thrust reduction, transition altitude 6,000 feet, and we're going flex 58 degrees Celsius. Just check that over here, flex 58. And there's the THS, trimmable horizontal stabilizer setting of 30%. Now that's not set there right now, it will do that automatically after start. So that's it, that's the performance page done. This noise tab, don't worry about that, it's an extra feature for enhancing the noise capability, but we're already doing the thrust reduction and the flex takeoff, so that's all done. And that's the takeoff performance done. You can see here the current cruise level it's aiming for, what its optimum is, what its maximum is, and then you can actually see on these tabs the planned climb speeds and cruise speeds, but you don't need to fiddle with that right now. That's all good. So over here, I'm going to do the usual. I'm going to put this to the active flight plan. Great. And that is the FMS loaded. Now we can actually bring up these charts over on this EFB, and this is what you'll see this commonly used for in the real A350. If I press terminal charts now, I've loaded in my Navigraph data, and I can select the airport, LIRF, and I can bring up the AGC, Airport Ground Chart. And here it is. We're taking off from runway 25, currently parked about here, so we'll taxi out like that from runway 25 departure. Now something else that's quite cool is that you can have an airfield navigation function on this navigation display. If I go to plan or indeed nav mode and just keep zooming in, it will load up. Now it will take it a second to do that. There's a little bit of lag for just a moment when it does, so I'm not going to fiddle with anything just to give it a chance. And this is a great feature. Again, this is actually available on lots of Airbus aircraft, including 320s if the airline pays for the option. But it's particularly handy when you have a heavy airplane like this that might be taxiing around in an airport where you're not allowed down certain taxiways. So you want your pilots to have the best situational awareness available. And here we go. That's runway 07 over there. But I can actually click. Oh, no, carefully. There we go. And if I get it just right, nice and slowly, you can move the map around. Now we're in plan, so actually if I go to nav, it should see us here. And we're on stand 608. You can see the taxiways around us, and you can do things like click on it and add a flag. So let's say that's where we were cleared to taxi, add a flag. Let's say that we know that this taxiway is closed for us because it says the wingspan limit or something. Add a cross. We don't want to go through that. They're a little bit small, but they are there nonetheless. I quite like that. And then you can see your taxi plan all the way out. We'll see again on the way in that we can use this for our our brake to vacate function. So yeah, I'm going to have that set to that for now. I'm going to turn the systems pages off. There we go. So the doors are all closed. Everything's pretty much ready to go. And I'm going to put the seatbelt signs on. Now we have the fuel on. And I think it's time for us to run the checklist. So first of all, let's go back to ground. Let's go to the GPU. Don't need the GPU. Don't need the chocks. Parking brake is set. And now we're going to run the checklist. Now this is an electronic checklist I mentioned earlier. This is a great system, and this is the future of checklists. So you have these shortcut buttons here that can take you to a init page. I can use it to get to flight plan page. I really like this, or the direct to page. What I'm going to do is go to the CL menu, checklist menu, and here it brings us up at the correct checklist, the 4-star checklist. You can actually reset the checklist if you want to start from scratch. And what I'm going to do is tick through the items. So just click on it there. There we go. Gear pins and covers removed. Fuel quantity, we have 18.5 tons. Takeoff data is set. Barra ref, we're on 1013 both sides, which is correct. Tick. I wonder if I can do it through here anyway. I'm sure you can in the real aircraft. Doors are closed, park brake is on, and we need to turn on the beacon. So let's do a little flow. Thrust levers closed, windows closed, doors closed. We'll put the beacon on. And that is the 4-star checklist complete. And you can see it's jumped straight through to the after start because it was all complete and it skipped over. So we'll get rid of that. We don't want to do the after start just yet. That'll be the next checklist. So let's go to the perf page like we had. Great. The only other things we want to do now is I'm going to turn on the transponder. Now you might be wondering where that is. If you press on, 2 ways to do it actually. Down here in the radio panel, I can actually see the Squawk 2000 standbys down here. If I go to the Squawk tab, I can type in the Squawk, so 1, 2, 3, 4, and there it is, but it's in standby mode. Okay, so what we need to do is go to surveillance, and then I can type in the transponder code in there, but I'm going to put it to auto. Then we're on standby on the TCAS and norm, and now it's reporting to our traffic control. So there you go. So that's done. Back to FMS1. Now we have missed something here, haven't we? We didn't put in the FCU data. So being an Airbus, the speed is in managed -- so that means our B2 speed of 146 is there. Heading we don't need because it's got nav armed, so that's good. So that's as expected. Altitude window, let's imagine we were cleared up to 10,000 feet. So make sure you do set your cleared altitude in there from what air traffic control told you. And now you should look like this. You've got our speeds over here. Climb and nav are armed. Those are the next modes I wanted to go into. 1 FD2, so the flight directors are on. Just 1 flight director button on the 350, FD over here. And then 10,000 feet is our altitude becoming a flight level, which we'll go to. In fact, let's put 120 as our cleared flight level. So we'll change that once we're going. Good. And now let's just go back to our checklist menu and make sure that's the after start checklist is next. So that's good. We've got our beacon on, our transponder's on. we know our route, and if I go back to our ground charts, I think it's time to push back. Super straightforward. Over here I'm going to go to grounds, and we're going to ask for the pushback straight back. And now it should start connecting the tug, and we'll get the airplane underway. Awesome. Awesome, awesome, awesome. Like I say, big airplane this, but it looks great. Off it goes. It's quite an aggressive start. You'll see that we haven't pressurized the airplane yet. That will happen automatically when the engine starts up. Very standard Airbus procedure versus the Boeing procedure of pressurizing before pushback. So that's why our ailerons are out there drooping down. Now my understanding is on the 350 we would start one engine at a time. I'm not 100% certain on that, but it's not all long-haul aircraft that start both at once, so I'm not sure. So let's just do it safe, and we'll do one at a time. We'll start engine number 1. I'm going to move just like on the 320. Ignition switch to ignition start. Screen comes up, pressure and so on, master switch on. It highlights it with the boxes. Let's just stop this pushback now, so straight line and stop. Highlights with the boxes, and it's a standard bleed air system, so just like a 320. Bleed air is being pushed in, it's spinning the N3 and N2 compressors. That starts to spin the N1, set that parking brake. And then fuel flow is introduced. Then we're looking for the exhaust gas temperature to rise. I quite like these white boxes that show you which engine's being started, and there's the igniters A and B running. And up it goes. I can hear it starting. Right, let's start up engine number 2. Same thing. Click. Now notice the draining oil at the bottom here. This is common on modern engines. The 787 engines do it as well. It is a noticeable thing. As they taxi around, you can see a bit of vapor or steam, or I think it's excess oil being burnt off. So yeah, really cool to see that coming out that drain at the bottom after start. I've never seen that in an aircraft in Flight Simulator before. It's very accurate. You see it, it's quite common on these modern aircraft, and it can be quite noticeable. It's actually something that people were a little bit unsure of at first. So yeah, really cool detail. Right, that's both the engines up and running, so we're standard Airbus after start flow. First of all, we'll put the switch back to norm, then we'll come up here. Don't need the APU bleed, don't need the APU, so they can go off. We don't need the engine anti-ice or the wing anti-ice, the weather's lovely. Moving down here, I'm going to arm those ground spoilers, and that is actually already run the trim. The trim will stabilise to the right position. If it doesn't, if the trim does not go in the right position, let's say you've started on the runway or something like that, all you need to do is disarm and then rearm, and it will rerun it. There you go, it's even gone more accurate, 29.8. Rudder trim, I'm going to reset to 0, not sure if you need to, and we'll go flaps 1, that was what we were set for takeoff, and I can see that over here, flaps 1. Great. We don't need to check the status and so on, I don't think, because once those flaps are out, we'll see that it's happy and we can run the checklist. You could just about hear the flaps running there. Let me just show you something. I'm just going to run those flaps out again for you so you can hear the sounds. This is great. It's such a distinctive feature. The 380 is similar, but 350 is very loud. Hear all those hydraulic pumps, the motors whirring and whining. Fantastic. It's so distinctive. I've been on a 350 as a passenger, sat around here, and yeah, you can really hear this. Another cool feature is look how these spoilers have drooped on top. This is to do with the design of the 350 flaps. It's a really modern design that allows them to actually blend the wing in by having the spoilers droop below their normal position. You can actually see here, that line there, so the ailerons have drooped down below, and this is sort of the wing position, and you can see those ailerons have actually, the spoilers have actually had dropped down. So if I start rolling the airplane to the left, look at that, they actually move up to level, and then they come up above with the aileron. So that is all built into the way IniBuilds have modeled this. Really great. And as you see, if I bring the flaps up, then they all seal together. This is common. 787 does something similar, but what it also does is, as you taxi out, the spoilers are actually lifted off the flaps, because on the 787 the wing is quite flexible, so it's to avoid it rubbing on there. Yeah, right, we'll run them back down, and we'll leave them in position this time. Great sound effect though, they've absolutely nailed that. Right, we've done our after start flow, so it's after start checklist time. Go down here, press CL menu. Anti-ice, not required. After start, checklist is complete, and you'll see in just a second it will disappear. Great. So, clear on the right, clear on the left, we're going to go forwards, then we'll do a little left, right, and taxi out to the runway. I'm going to put the nose light to taxi. Oh, we've done that by accident already. And I would also have a look at the taxi camera, but of course that doesn't work on this version at the moment, because the simulator is just a limitation of the simulator, Microsoft Flight Simulator. Parking brake released. Now we are very light, so it's going to roll naturally. But as you saw, I have it set so that my rudder does the tiller as well, and yeah, that works really quite nicely. We can see over here the doors have gone blue, so the doors are armed, which is good news too. So let's go back to our charts, and we're over here. So it's great for situational awareness. It does feel nice as it taxis. They're using some of Microsoft Flight Simulator 2024's new sort of weighted physics for moving around on the ground, and it is nice. It does feel lovely. It's such a distinctive flight deck, isn't it, the 350, with these straight lines. It's very unusual to me, big straight lines. I'm also not entirely convinced about having the big screen here and then a little PFD here, but I'm sure it's totally fine. It's just a subjective preference sort of thing. Right, let's do this turn. Long aeroplane, but weirdly that nose gear is right underneath us, so we can't put our nose too far over the line like you would in some other airplanes. So if I stop it there, let's just have a look. Yeah, that should be absolutely fine, and then I'm going to bring it left. You don't want to push it too far with this airplane. Even this is a little bit close for comfort. So yeah, I don't know why it's like that, but that nose gear is far forward. Yeah, you can see actually it's quite manoeuvrable. The main gear would have been fine. We could have started that turn earlier. Nice big wide turn here. Beautiful machine though, isn't it? Just lovely. Around the corner we go. All pretty straightforward, and we'll take the second right from here. Taxiing a long-haul airplane like this, somewhere around 20 knots is going to be the sweet spot for straight lines, and then you're going to need it below 10 knots for your tight turns, and then you may even need a little bit of power to get around them if you're taxiing out with full tanks, but we're not today, so this airplane's very light and manoeuvrable. Now this is an Airbus, so automatically when I want to test the flight controls, which we can do while taxiing, all I have to do is move them. So let's move the side stick full right, and look at that, the flight control page comes up. It knows that's what we want to see. Just great. I really like this page. It's very good. It's changed slightly in format, but if I move the side stick right, you can see the green bars for where the controls have moved. You can see the ailerons are drooped into the takeoff position, and likewise we go the opposite way. What I really like is you can actually see how much the spoilers have moved as well, which is something you couldn't do on the 320. We can also do the elevator, which is at the back, so just one on each side, elevators each direction, and then the rudder full left, and as you can see it's connected to the tiller, so it's steering us as well. But there we go. So that's all good. We would run our takeoff brief updates. We can also arm the auto brake. You just literally press the auto brake button, and of course it does brake RTO. It knows we're trying to take off, so it automatically goes to the RTO position. Don't need the brake fans on, and I can press takeoff config down here and hold it, and then that will go green there. So that's all good. So that says the takeoff configs ready, so I think we can run our checklist. So I go to checklist menu, for takeoff checklist, flight controls checked, and your co-pilot will check as well. Flight instruments checked. We're on the QNH. We're going to flight level 120 with nav mode. Briefing we've updated. V1, VR, V2 are all set, but I could go to takeoff perf over here and check it again. 3.5, 3.9, and 4.6, and we have thrust rating of flexing 58 degrees. Squawk is set, and takeoff runway confirm. We're going for runway 25, and camera crew advise. Packs are staying on, and that is the before takeoff checklist complete. And there we go. Taxiing out to the full length. What else could we do? So let's imagine we cleared the line up via traffic control. So I'll put the landing lights on, I'll put the strobe lights on as well, and I'll put the nose light to takeoff. Signal signs are already on. You might advise the cabin crew, that's your procedure. And you can see here, see this green arrow? This shows that this is the runway we have takeoff performance loaded for. Really, really good feature to make sure that you're matching, that you have the takeoff performance of the correct runway. Very, very dangerous to take off from the runway that you didn't have performance for, of course. So let us zoom out now. We've reached that runway, we're in the right place. Still got that green arrow. I think that's a great feature, really smart idea. We'll use the very, very full length departure of this one. Slow it down, nice and gentle for the turn. And as we saw earlier, I don't need to go quite as deep into the turn as I did, because that nose gear is way far forwards. There we go, that's looking alright. Still a big machine. Look how close we're getting to these lines. It's clear out on the approach, clear out on the runway, and we're cleared the line up, and we're cleared to take off. Now we don't need to start the chrono at start of takeoff, although you have the option to. It's there, just like on the 320. I love how similar some of these screens are. But we also have the flight timer down here, which does start running at liftoff, which is something the 787 does as well. It's funny to see the similarities, actually. There's more than I imagined. Now this isn't actually part of the runway where we are now, so I'm going to get the airplane over to the threshold. There's quite a clear distinction between taxiways, runways and so on, and you've got to get it right. Okay. Now there's a couple of cool things I'd like to show you here just before we do take off, so do forgive me. First of all, we have tyre deformation, so you might have seen it already in the video, but the tyres are slightly squidged on the nose gear around the bottom, and they're more squidged on the main gear, and you can see where they bulge at the bottom because of the weight of the airplane, which is really cool, something you do see on real airliners. I used to fly the Dash 8 Q400, which is one of the few airliners that the passengers can actually see the wheels on. And it wasn't uncommon for passengers to see the wheels deformed like that and call us up to say that the tyre was flat. So it's, yeah, it's a definite effect, and it's cool to see it modelled. Next up, I want to show you what happens with the condensation effects. So they've modelled some features that you normally only see with external sort of immersion packs. So I've set it to rain, and now if I spool up those engines, got to get this just right, you should see the intake vortices from the runway. Look at that, just for a moment. Let me try and run it down to get the right. There it is, look, how cool is that? Just for a moment at the right power setting. Give it one more go. There it is, awesome. And then if we go to higher power, you'll see the condensation form in the intake. How cool is that? Not something I've seen in another airliner so far. That is caused by low pressure in the intake of the engine in very humid air, and what happens is, oh, a bit too much, there's reverse. What happens is the air goes to lower pressure, it can't hold as much moisture, and you see the condensation appear in front of it. So let's just get those throttles to idle. There they are. Great. So yeah, really cool features. And we'll see later on, if I can show you, that you get the vortices coming off the nacelle strakes here over the wing as well, which is a really, really nice touch. That is a big feature. You see that quite commonly on airliners. Right, it is time to go. So what I'm going to do is release that parking brake, half side stick forwards, stabilise the engines. Hopefully you can hear it. I'll just turn up the audio just a little fraction. Get the nice sound effects. And then just like an R320, 2 clicks forwards, to flex, and I want to see man flex 58 SRS runway, auto thrust armed and blue. You can hear that thumping, and you'll hear the nose gear retract. It's very noisy because it's right beneath us, and Pablo, their 350 captain, said that's accurate. 80 to 100 knots, stick to neutral. I've got to say it feels lovely. The auto tiller disconnect is great, so now my rudders feel very natural. And it's not trying to lift off early. V1. There's rotate, and then nice and gentle. It's quite sensitive, I believe. Keep rotating through because we are going to climb very nicely today. And there we go. It's got us in nav mode. Positive climb. Gear up. And prepare for the noise of that landing gear. Oh, it does feel nice to fly though. Listen to that. That's because it's right beneath you there. Right underneath the flight deck. Like I say, very far forward. Very unusual. But away we go. What a beautiful machine. So we're through acceleration, lowering the nose, and then just as normal, maybe don't lower it too much, it is quite sensitive. Thrust levers back to climb, thrust climb, oh it says thrust decline, which I think means derated, I need to check that. And then autopilot 1 and auto thrust, and now it's making its right turn. Obeying the 200 knot speed limit here. It's also got another one, RF 706. What I'm going to do is actually leave the flaps out for that, just to make sure that we're in the right range. You've also got flap auto retract on the 350, something that they don't have on the smaller ones. This little green line here, so it means the airplane shouldn't try and bust the flaps. It should try, I believe it will retract them in a bit like the auto retraction you had on the 320, but this can also auto extend if it needs to. Fantastic. Right, gear is up. We're leaving the flaps where they are for now, and I'm just going to leave it in QNH for a little bit until we make it past this altitude restriction here. But we're climbing away, we're roaring away in our 350. Beautiful. Okay, we're coming up to the restriction. This is all very, very standard Airbus. We'll see now the target speed increase. I'm going to be curious to see what the flaps do actually, so let's try that out. So the target speed should jump to 250. That's what it would do on a 320. But it might sit lower because it knows we haven't brought the flaps in, which is what I'm hoping it will do, because I think that's a much more sensible feature. The 787 would do that. The 787 won't target a speed in the flap range, flap limits. So there we go. It has gone to 250, so let's see what happens now. I'm going to set QNH. By the way, this time you push it to set QNH, and there you go. Sorry, to set standard. So standard is now set. And let's see what happens to those flaps. You can see them down here. So you would now, the normal procedure is we're above the green S, so I would retract the flaps to 0. But let's just see what happens. Because it has this new green thing. There we go. They're bringing in the 1, so this is auto retraction, just like on the 320. And then it's going to be okay. So yeah. Anyway, let's stop playing around, so we'll bring them in. As you would do as per procedure anyway. Flaps are up at 0, so we'll disarm the ground spoilers, and we can get rid of the nose light as the nose gear is now retracted. Fantastic climb rate. Excellent performance on an airplane this big and powerful when it's this light. So now we're climbing away, and it very much becomes a pretty standard Airbus experience aside from this sort of decline, derate. But the other modes, you know, it's all the same. Climb, nav, it's got out blue, which is going to level off at flight level 120 and 1,000 feet. But we can do lots of the normal things. So let's say we're cleared higher now to flight level 200, I can just wind that in. Great new feature is that we get this display on here that shows us, so it shows us the constraints from a side-on view. So this is us, this is our climbing points, and you can see the magenta. So there's a above 110 at RF 712, and you can see we're going to make it. If I was to put the flight level to something lower, you'll actually see it go amber, there you go, above our level here. So it's at RF 712, although it's above 110, it's going to be we're going to be not able to maintain the profile it has in its head, because that's the dashed line, and that's quite cool. So let's say we cleared up to flight level 200, put that in the window. You can also pull it just like before and have open climb. Now the airplane would ignore the constraints and it would just sail on up at climb thrust up to flight level 200. So that's featured nicely in there, and we were, you know, you can put up 300 over you want. Of course, vertical speed is exactly the same. You can pull, you get speed, vertical speed 2,200, and you can wind that according to whatever you fancy having. And pushback, manage climb, and we get thrust, decline, climb. I mean, it's all as you'd expect. Same for heading, no heading bug, but I can set a heading and pull, and the airplane will then go into open climb heading, and it will turn. Unlike the Boeing, it will not stay in VNAV, so it's reverted to open climb. It won't say managed climb, I should say. And away we go. Yeah, and now we're just cruising around on the heading bug just like normal. Very standard Airbus. If you're used to 320, this will all be very familiar to you. You'll feel right at home. In particular, this FMS is straight out of the 380, or very similar to it, so you'll have no trouble there. Down here we can see our maximum cruise levels, so you can see this is the perf page. Active perf, climb, and it shows us the cruise we're planning, 400, and the optimum flight level 414, maximum 414. EO max, which is the engine out maximum for 279. You can click through the tabs to see the cruise tab as well, which will show you the speed it's planning to fly in the cruise, which is 259 knots indicated, giving us a Mach of 0.85. Pretty fast, similar speeds to the 787, a slightly faster turbulent speed than the 787. And then you can obviously see the descent and approach phase, which we'll talk about when we set up for those. So just put it back to climb for now. Now if I go to flight plan, and remember you have the shortcuts down here, I can really easily select a point, let's say Soban, click, and then from PPOS direct to Soban, insert, and off it goes. And there we go, Soban, nav, and it's gone back into nav mode automatically. And remember, you can also press DIR down here and then select the waypoint up here, so I could tune in the one I want to have, or select it from the drop down. So we can now go direct to GovGo, GovGo, insert, and now it'll do that turn. It's so intuitive, I just love using it, really love using it. And there it goes. Now it won't surprise you then that the rest of the flight is going to be very similar to how we've handled it with our 320 before. We're going to climb up to our cruise, we will do some systems checks, and we can set up for the arrival into London. It's also very easy to set up or change the arrival. So you can see Heathrow is down here, and it shows the arrival time and fuel expected in 760 nautical miles. But let's say for some reason we need to return into Rome where we've just departed from. By the way, through flight level 120 we can also turn off our landing lights, of course, and let the passengers walk around. So let's say I want to return. Well, that's super easy as well. We're currently routing direct to GovGo, which is up ahead of us. If I wind the scale out, we'll see that. GovGo. So let's select GovGo, if I click on it, and then, look at this, I can choose new destination, and then I can type into here, LIRF, enter, insert, and now we have a new destination, and the flight plan ends at GovGo. Then I can select the airport and just go to arrival. And let's say I want to land on, you guessed it, runway 16 left. We'll do the RLS Whiskey, and we will do the LCAP 3 Alpha, and we'll come in via Subok. And now if I go to plan and zoom in, lo and behold, as you'd expect, there is that arrival. Temporary flight plan, insert. And now I'm going to go direct to LCAP. And you could insert it as the next waypoint, but let's just go direct to LCAP now. Insert. I'm really pushing the flight management system here. There we go. So we're going out to LCAP and then back round. And that's it. So that's set up for the arrival. So I've just changed it. You could also, of course, use the original one you had in your flight plan. So let's do the normal things. Let's just level off at 220 and then set up for the arrival. Right, let's set up for that arrival, and then we'll look at handling of the airplane and the night lighting, things like that. So we're routing back. We've already done the flight plan page. What I need to do next is go through to performance, and I can go to the approach performance tab. Now, over here, I'm going to also go to my landing performance. Now, I'm landing on runway 16 left, so I'm going to sync with the FMS, just like we did for departure. Sync the weather as well, and we know it's slightly different weather. It's not going to make much difference to the landing performance, but we'll land configuration full, so full flap, with no additional pilot correction, and we'll do manual landing with, you can have manual or medium brakes, but we're going to do brake to vacate, which we'll see shortly, and we won't use reverses. Good. It's already got the weight loaded in, so then I can just do compute. Really great. Look at that. So it shows us on here that we're going to fit just fine using medium auto brake. So if you want to use medium auto brake, I can just press auto brake now, and it will arm medium auto brake. But what I want to do is actually use the brake to vacate feature to allow the airplane to modulate the brakes to vacate the runway at the exit I choose to. This way we don't miss the exit, it's more comfortable for passengers, better for brake wear because it will just do one brake application, and it means there won't be a delay as we sort of mess around on the runway trying to get to our exit. So to do this, I'm going to go back to plan and zoom all the way in, and you can see the airport. Now, you can see here there's a green arrow on 2.5 because that's where we took off from. So ignore that and look for the green arrow, which is showing 16 left, which is where we have decided to land. And then all I need to do is scroll down to the exit I want. So let's take Delta Hotel, and I can just select it, set BTV exit with a left click. How easy is that? And it shows you the distance. It's a long way down the runway. So sorry, it's a long runway. We're exiting at 2,500 meters out of 3,900 meters. Gives us the temperatures and so on, and how long the airplane needs. And that's on the dry runway. If you click up on this double arrow, you could do this without Navigraph charts, and you could actually say on the landing tab, BTV exit at, and you could just type in the distance. So you would just type in 2,500 or whatever distance you want it to slow down to. You can, of course, also choose the runway state if it's dry or wet, and you can go through this scroll wheel to change that as well, but we are on a dry runway today. You see it says brake medium though, that's not what I want, so now let's press it again, brake to vacate, BTV. And that's it, super simple. How good's that? So we have that set up now on our nav display, and we've done our landing performance. Next thing I'm going to do is just bring up the ILS chart for 16 left. So we go to IAC, and then ILS 16 left, whiskey, had to be the last one of course. Give it a second to load. There it is, 3 degree ILS onto our 3,900 meter runway, and we're going to type in our minimums of for Cat 1. Yep, minimum we're going to go with 300. I believe it's a Cat D aeroplane, even though it does have relatively slow approach speeds, but they can still go a bit high. So Cat D 300 on the minimum. Okay. So back to our perf tab, we can type in the wind as we've discussed. Now it's pretty calm. I'm going to put it in 160. Enter. Cursor jumps over, so 5 knots. Outside air temperature is 15. Enter. QNH 1013. Enter. And Barrow 300 minima. Enter. You've got radio there for low vis. Exactly the same as the 320. Look at that. It's got config full. It's got the landing speed. VLS over the VAP of 141, and you could also change the go around tab if you needed to, but we don't need to. So that's all done. So we've done our flight plan, done our route, done our performance and minima. So now what I'm going to do is scroll out on here, go back to ARC, let's get rid of the ANF, the airfield navigation function, and let's zoom out. Okay, it's getting a little bit confused because I've given it a horrendous path to try and fly. So what I'm going to do is go to flight plan, and we'll start pointing it towards Rome. So some other cool features that you have in this aeroplane that make it quite special. We've already talked about this whole VNAV thing, so we're actually not going to go any higher. So let me go to the active perf, and in here I can type in the new cruise level. So 220, we're not going any higher. So if I type in 220, enter, it will swap over into out cruise just like 320, and now it should redraw its vertical profile, and it will give us a top of descent for the way in towards Rome, which is good. We also, if we need to get these screens moved around, imagine if this screen down here broke. Oh, there you go, we're actually above the top of the descent, it's working it out. If this screen broke and we needed to have our FMS available elsewhere, I can press OIS and swap that out to this screen, and then we also have our charts in the middle, so you could actually brief your charts together like this, which is quite a neat feature, I think. And obviously vice versa, you can do the same for the first officer. It's really handy. These big screens are sort of compatible with doing this, so that you can keep the information where you need it, because you don't want to have the airplane unable to be able to fiddle around with the FMS just because one screen broke. It'd be pretty annoying. So clever bits of redundancy there. Also, if we look at the systems pages, there's lots going on in here, but it's all sort of simplified down. Aircraft manufacturers don't put all the real information here. This is the DC page. If we go to electrical AC page, you'll see, look, we've got this many bus bars. There's way more. You heard them all clicking when we started up. This is just incredibly simplified information for the pilots. On the 787, even when we have an abnormal situation, we're not encouraged particularly to look at those screens because they're not very useful for diagnosis, aside from some of the basics like, the pressure in the hydraulic systems and so on. Now you'll see that on some of these screens, if I go for example wheel, there's this little, let's actually press it, wheel, there's this little more, ... more. Now this is to show us extra information that the airplane has available that is not bothering to show us right now because it doesn't think we need it. So if I want to see it, I can press more there, and it will show us some more information like the pressure in the nose gear. So what it does is it just hides it, it declutters the information that it doesn't think we need, which is quite a neat system. Oh, I can't actually see it. What button that is now. There we go. So that is that's what that more means. But again, you shouldn't really need it unless you're doing something really broken. Good. Let us start our descent then in towards Rome. I'm going to simplify this arrival. So let us put in. Let's do direct. So I'll do DAR. And I'm going to go to 426. 426, insert. And we're obviously way above the profile now, so let's put in flight level 100. And we'll do thrust on open descent. And you can see there, normal vertical profile, it wants to be way below where we are, so we're 8,400 feet high. So it's wound the speed up to 318, and it's going to dive down, and then it will reduce the speed just before we get to RF 426. We've got very powerful speed brakes on this airplane, so we can actually help ourselves out there if we need to, which we probably will need to. Just before we do that, I want to just show you some of the lighting. So let's set it to sort of a gloomy evening. There we go, and you can see those screens automatically adjusting to the brightness. You can see the way the LCDs glow around the edges. Really cool. IniBuilds have worked hard at getting a sort of a proper pixelated effect on these screens, so that looks absolutely great. And we do actually have even the pedal lights. Look at that. Great feature for making sure there's, before the flight, checking there's nothing behind the pedals. Again, the 787 does have the same thing. And I'm going to turn on all the lights outside now. Let's get the passenger strapped in, then we can have a look. So put the wings, landing lights, nose is tucked away anyway, and we'll force the logo lights on. And yeah, look at that. Glorious, glorious machine. Looks absolutely beautiful. They've done a great job with the lighting on this airplane. It's funny to see the wing lights. It's quite an unusual feature. Well, it's not unusual. A lot of airliners still have wing lights. I don't really know why, because you just can't see the wings from the flight deck, but you could, I suppose, walk back if you wanted to check the leading edge for eyes or something like that. But yeah, what a beauty. So yeah, really lovely. Great lighting in the flight deck. And if we jump out into the cabin, you can see they've got the lighting done properly in here as well. Really cool. Look at that. Beautiful stars on the overhead. Really neat. Right, let's get back into our seat. And we'll make it daylight again, so we should see what's going on. Oof, that would hurt. On long haul, the sun is not a very popular thing when it's shining in. That's why you have all these sunshades drawn across, and you'd expect to see this on most long haul airplanes for a large part of the cruise if it's daylight, because it's just so much light in here otherwise. I do love the colour, this sort of strong red they've gone for on these visors. That's great. Right, what else can we look at? Let's have a look at the handling of the airplane. I think this is quite a good place to do it actually. We're quite a good altitude. So I'm going to turn off the autopilot. I'm going to leave the flight director on. Actually, no, let's turn the flight director off, and then we're in speed mode, and I'm just going to get it to target, let's just target 240 knots for now, so we'll pull 240 knots. Now, I've noticed this already. I've done a couple of flights in the 350 so far, and it is lovely. Now, Pablo, the 350 type rated pilot that they have in their stream, the IniBuilds stream, references that it's quite a sensitive airplane, and I can see what he means. Like, it's very responsive. That's maximum roll rate, but it feels very much like a 320. It doesn't feel too heavy and sluggish, but it does feel like it has mass. There's definitely weight in there. So it's an interesting airplane to fly, but it's very enjoyable. And this is in 2024 I'm using it, remember. It's a very, like I say, enjoyable experience. It's quite predictable, it's very stable, very Airbus. It does feel very Airbus. And if we get a bit of a nose up, you can see how quickly it can respond if you force it to. So you do have to be a little bit careful, and I think in the landing flare it could be easy to overdo the roll. I think that's a thing that was mentioned. What I also want to do is just check the protections. Let's check it does behave like an Airbus. So will it let me overbank? I would hope not. IniBuilds have made lots of Airbuses by this point. There we go, 66 degrees and done. And likewise, will it let me go down through minus 15 degrees? No, it won't. So there you go. It is behaving as you would expect for an Airbus. It's got their normal flight control protections built in, as you would hope. Yeah, it's very nice. Very nice indeed, actually. I mean, you're not going to spend much time hand flying it, but that's a bit of a shame because it's quite enjoyable. More lively than I imagined. Also, something to note, look at the low speed, watch the ailerons. You'll see that the full aileron's moving because the aileron's broken into two parts, and you'll see it moving the full thing there. If we go back inside and let's just wind the speed up, what you'll see is that the aileron's actually, the outer part blocks itself out and the airplane will just use the inner part. This is to stop wing flexing when you're at high speed. And it doesn't need to use that outboard part, it doesn't need as much control surface, so it will use just the roll spoilers and the inboard aileron. The 787 does this, it locks out the outboard aileron and just uses that aileron. There's an aileron in the inner part of the wing, which is the Boeing way around this problem. But Airbus on the 380 and the 350 have gone for this. So now we're accelerating, see that? Just the inboard part of that aileron is moving, and the out part is locked where it is. So you're just getting the roll spoilers and the inboard part. Neat, it's really cool. Yeah, slight different ways of going about it between Airbus and Boeing there. Love it. It's also super easy to put in a hold. For example, I could click at Maven and then say hold, and then you can just inbound course, the time you want to define it, and then go to temporary flight plan and insert. I mean, it couldn't be easier, but I'm going to go to temporary flight plan and erase because we want to go straight in and fly our ILS. So we're going to head straight to Subok and then join the ILS. You can see here the profile, we're coming back down then, so we're 1,000 feet high on the profile, which is no problem at all. So there's speed out star. So let's now let the airplane fly the descent constraint. So 2,500 feet is our platform altitude. So I'm going to put 2,500 in the window here, and then use manage descent, and the airplane will plan it itself. You can hear that triple click, just like on the 320, because it's reverted to a vertical speed. So what I can do is go manage speeds, manage DES, and there it is, DES, and it's got the out magenta, because it's going to fly a level off at flight level 40. It's going to do that because that is a constraint in the FMS. Now we're going down to a QNH, so I can set the QNH, and here's a cool feature. You can actually pre-select it now. This is something you could do on Boeing's for a long time, but Airbus hasn't had it on the 320. You'd have to sort of pull and then reset it and then bring it back. So now you can set it in that little window. Let's say the QNH was 1010, and then it would appear there, and then it would disappear, and then when you pull it, it goes straight to the QNH you pre-selected. However, today it is 1013, so there we go. So now we have DES mode out 2,500. It must be happy that it's going to make the Subok restriction, and it's slowing back down to 250 knots, and you can see there's the vertical profile. Good stuff. I'm going to help it out a little bit. Speed limit exceeded, speed error, there we go, okay. I'm just going to use the speed brakes just to get the speed back on the airplane a little bit. They're very effective. Look at that, look at the animation on the fabric around the speed brake lever. How cool is that? I've not noticed that before. Excellent. Now have a look at this. On the outside, I've increased the weathering, and you can see the jetty marks around the doors. You can see the stains down the windows. Like I say, these are hard-working airplanes, and there's a lot of, there's stuff in the air at airports, so it's no surprise that they get marks and grubby from sitting on the ground, even if it is just for a couple of hours a day. You can also see the panel lines around the front. Well, look at that, bits of paint have worn off the nose cone, and you've got the, like I say, the aluminium sort of rivet lines and so on, streaks from the windows. And to do that, all you have to do is go into here, go to aircraft, and then you can slide it to where you want it. So there we go, nice and clean, fresh from the factory. Beautiful. And filthy, covered in grime, hard-working aeroplane. Well, I've got to say, even the fully weathered isn't actually that bad to me, what you see in the real world on aircraft. But there we go, so let's leave it there with just a little bit of weathering. Some other 350 specific features here. We've got this amber box on the VNAV profile, the DES profile, and that means it's going to obey it more strictly. In the 320, if it were to get fast now, it would actually come off the profile, but that's not such a great idea when you're low down. So now it will stick to it, even if that means the speed will get too fast, so we have to be ready with the speed brakes if we need it to. Likewise, it can add thrust if it thinks it's getting low. It just wants to be on the correct vertical profile, and we can see that profile over here. This is very much how the 787 does it as well, the Boeing style of doing descents. So that's quite. I think it's quite a good idea. We'll also see if we activate the approach phase, which we just like we would do on the 320. So we'll activate that now. It would happen automatically in that magenta D there, but I'm going to do it myself. Confirm. Now it's reduced the target speed, but you've got two numbers now. We have the 138, which is the VAP, the approach speed, very low, I must say, for a long-haul airplane. It's a big wing and big effective flaps. Also, I think it comes in quite nose high. But we've also got this little dot which shows us the temporary managed speed. So instead of just disappearing like it did in the 320, where you wouldn't see the target speed once you've activated the approach phase, it now gives us a little dot to show us what it's actually targeting, which is quite a nice idea. We'll see that as we get a bit slower, it'll make more sense. Coming through 10,000 feet, we should have pressed LS. We do still need to do the whole LS thing, and that has done us shown us approach 1. This is slightly different. This isn't the mode we had in the 320. This is to do with showing you where you are in relation to the approach that you're trying to fly. And we've got the RMP 16 left whiskey in here, which is wrong. So I actually have done this wrong. We need to change the approach. I'm going to do the arrival. And let's just do ILS whiskey 16 left. Temporary flight plan. Insert. There we go. And it's trying to route to the wrong waypoint, so I'm just going to go direct to Auxerre. Insert. Here's something I didn't show you earlier. This is where the dry line is and the wet line is, so it shows you where the airplane is expecting. And we're going to go for, let's go for Delta Hotel again. And there we go. So yeah, so it does show you the dry and wet expected lines. And now a slight reposition here where I had to fit around my simulator a bit to get it, everything where I wanted it. But what you can see is that we also have Suvoc above 4,000, so I'm going to leave it with 2,500 in the window, and then I'll start it at descent shortly to match that profile. But also, of course, just like a 320, you need to press LS to bring up the LS scales. What that also gives you is this approach 1. This is a feature of the 350 which I don't fully understand, having not flown a 350, but it's to do with the capability of the airplane to fly an approach. The reason why that's becoming more and more useful in the modern world is that we have lots of approaches based on different things. For example, based on an ILS, which is a radio signal from the ground, or you'll have one that's based on RMP signals. So, based on the ability of the airplane to navigate, so an RNAV approach. Then you also have satellite receivers, you have different sort of ground-based enhancements for those. So this is telling us what the airplane is capable of at the moment in terms of an approach. It's not the landing, it won't show us Cat 3 dual, which is our autoline capability, until we're actually on the approach itself. I'm just going to start down, so there's DES, speed DES, and then it should obey the restrictions. So yeah, so that's why it's telling us that, and that's going to be useful in the future, especially when you've had things like GPS jamming that could affect the airplane's ability to fly a GPS-based approach, for example. So this would, I think, be able to tell you that. I'm not entirely sure though. We need a 350 pilot to update us on that. There we go. Now we're in a familiar picture. We have the ILS identified. We've got the ILS scales going down 2,500 as a platform, but the airplane should obey these other restrictions first. 4,000 at civil, for example. Awesome. It's interesting that it didn't actually go into that latched descent mode I talked about until it's close enough to the profile, and then it will. So when I just put it into DES, it just was descending 1,000 feet per minute below the profile. So there we go. So it's something to keep an eye out for, to make sure you are using it properly. So above 4,000 feet at Civok, it's achieved nicely. Hence, it didn't need to show us that because it's not going to level off. If it needed to level off at 4,000, it would have put it in magenta in the altitude window here, which I think we will see at... no, I don't think we'll see that now. I think it's going to go all the way to 2,500 and level off before the ILS. Oh, well, having said that, there's the 3,000 out magenta, so it might level off at 3 for a bit of Maven. Great. So now we're just descending in gently. The airplane can fly quite slow. As we said earlier, it's coming back to... It's got this sort of dot to show us the current temporary managed speed, but it's below 200 knots, you know, and we're now at a normal landing weight for this airplane. We've got 16 tons of fuel. That's actually quite a lot. We've got a reasonable zero fuel weight. So this is typical of an approach in a 350. So it's interesting how slow it can actually do that. Let's get those flaps out. So we'll go flap 1. Awesome, isn't it? Absolutely fantastic. Notice as well, you can see these flaps trembling in the airflow, sort of shaking. Looks absolutely fantastic, as does the wing flex, really nice. It's interesting that the 350, unlike the 320, does put out some of the trailing edge flaps as well as the slats when you go to flap 1. There we go. Right, there's our star. It's leveled off now. I'm going to arm the approach. We have the localizer ready to go, and then the second autopilot, and that should give us land 3 dual, AP1+2, just like we used to. There we go. Now we should also go into our checklist menu. So let's do that. And this is to do with me messing around with the simulator. So let's go for the approach checklist. Minimums, we've got 300 set, and barrier F, we're on 1013. Joining the ILS, running at flaps 1, so we'll put up the second stage of flap now, and of course you would also run the approach checklist through the checklist menu as we were doing on the departure, but I'm not going to worry about that right now. We're just going to show you this approach. There's the glide slope star, and we're going to put in the going altitude in, which in this case is going to be 2,000 feet. Put that in the window, and there we go. Radio altimeter's already alive. Already back at 160 knots though, flap 2, and we can check that we have 2 indeed down here. But let's get ourselves ready. So we'll lower the landing gear, and you'll hear that huge roar from that nose gear underneath us. Arm the ground spoilers as per usual, and we'll put on the landing light and the nose lights to taxi. Which way we want it? There we go. Good. So out come those massive wheels. Glorious. Big machine. And we'll go flap 3. And flap 4 for landing. And that should put us nicely set up. And then of course you would run the landing checklist. But again, we'll just focus in on the landing here now. You can see the terrain now on the radar. It's quite detailed actually, how it's got the lumps and bumps along there. If we can get to an instrument view in time. This is Microsoft Flight Simulator 2024 being an absolute treat. Nope, that's not going to work, so we won't do that. Yeah, so there we go. Line up at the runway then, and let's bring it in for a landing. So we talked earlier about landing the A350. It's a pretty standard Airbus landing. We're going to flare at about 30 feet. Raise the nose slightly, close the thrust levers, line it up with the runway with the rudder if we need to, and then let it touch down. It does come in slightly nose high. It's something I do notice about 350s when you see them on approach. If you see it here, it's actually not as high as I think I see them in real life, although we'll see it a little bit closer on. I think it will stabilise at around 2.5 degrees. 787 for context stabilises around 1 degree. So it's a noticeable nose up which gives it slightly lower landing speeds, allows it to get into runways, use less brake wear and so on. So it's a handy feature. Right, let's disconnect the autopilot. This is not the correct way. I'm just doing this because I haven't got the button assigned at the moment on my Xbox controller. There we go, and it downgrades just like normal. But yeah, and it can be a little bit sensitive if we're not careful. So the trick here is not to overcorrect, not to go too mad with the pitch or with the... There we go, now the nose is up at 2.5 degrees. And not to get too responsive to that glide slope because it's still a bit glitchy in Microsoft Flight Simulator in general. You can see it's easy to overdo it on the roll as well. Try and keep it steady. 2 whites, 2 reds. Just a small flare at 30 and then idle.
50, 40, 30.
Flare, bit too much.
20.
Idle.
10.
There we go. Touchdown there. Now holding the nose, no more nose up or we're going to find ourselves in trouble. Get the reverse idle out. And we're down. Not a great landing, bit of a floater. I have managed better in the 350. It is actually quite pleasant to land. There we go, now reverse this route. And now BTV is activated. And all we need to do is watch as the airplane, well, hopefully, it's automatically zoomed in. I love that feature on this chart. And then it should drop us off right at DH at exactly the right amount. And I haven't had to touch the brakes at all. Really great feature, that. And it works exactly as designed. IniBuilds have done a great job with it. So it's going to keep slowing down, and then it should, I think, I'm not touching the brakes at all. I don't think it will come to a complete stop. There you go. It converts over. So let's just take out the auto brake ourselves by applying them ourselves. And there we go. I'm going to bring it to a stop though. And there we go. Welcome back to Rome. Also, let's have a quick look at that Birdstrike situation. So if I go to menu, situations, I'm going to enable them and then start the Birdstrike. This is irreversible once you do it, so it's going to make a mess. So we're cruising along. Oof, did you get the horrible noise? Getting some rattling sounds. And look at this, it's put amber around the engine it's worried about, which is a really good feature. It's giving us the thrust lever MCT, so it wants an MCT because it's sensed an engine failure, so we'll do that, back into speed mode. And you can see here it gives us the ECAM for what we should do. But what I want to do is just show you what's happened. Now, I don't know where that one actually hit. I've seen some that have damaged the radome for now, but you can see here the left engine. Look at that, that's changing in the modelling. I've never seen that before in a sim. And like I say, I have done this before and seen blood on the radome when that's been dented in. This one looks like it just hit the engine. How cool. I mean, not cool. It's an amazing feature of flight sim. It is not something I want to experience, thank you. Of course, I have hit birds in my career, but thankfully never once big enough to cause an engine failure. But there we go. That's modelled, and like I say, you can then run through the actions in here if you want to, including shutting down the engine carefully, and it goes through. And you can run through this, by the way, look, so thrust lever 1 idle, thrust lever number 1. This is not, by the way, how you do it. You confirm it with the other pilot. Thrust lever number 1 idle, engine 1 master off. Again, you would confirm it. You want to confirm you're getting the correct engine. So it's in amber over here. Master switch number 1, that's one idle, off. And is engine 1 damaged? Well, it's not spinning at all, so I'd say yes, the N1 is seized, so it's definitely damaged. We heard the bang. So you have a question, and then what you can do is you can actually hit the little tick down here, if I can find it. Tick. Damaged. Yes. Engine 1 fire, push button, push. engine 1 fire push button, and again you confirm with the other pilot, because it's very important you don't push the wrong one right now. Push, and it takes you through. So just to show you that this is here, it's really cool, really cool. So that's all for today's video. Thank you so much for watching. I hope it's been interesting for you. Like I say, this is a remarkable aeroplane, and it's a remarkable simulation. It's one of the most immersive sort of complete packages of an airliner I've seen in any of the flight simulators that we've had the luxury to get to try out. Thank you again to IniBuilds for sending over, I can say, a preview version. This is not the final release, so yeah, but that will be coming soon. And hopefully this has given you an idea of just what you might want to do with your A350, and just how some of the extra features and extra different things it can do are achieved. There'll be plenty more videos, guys, live streams coming on the channel, so do please subscribe if you'd like to see those. We'll see you again in another video or live stream soon. Thank you so much for watching. Bye bye.